Good evening, everybody. When you are pregnant and you're expecting a baby, one of the most exciting days of your whole journey is the ultrasound day. It's the day you finally get to find out if you're having a boy or girl. I remember when we were going in, it was our third child. We were going into the hospital parking lot, and we had the same discussion every time. Do we park where there's a blue stork parking spot or a pink stork? And this is a conversation we had driving in. And we would pull in and we'd hedge our bets and pick our spot, and then we'd go up these stairs, sit in the lobby, and then finally go back into an ultrasound room. And as we sit in this cold and dark ultrasound room, I remember just waiting. And the ultrasound tech comes in and she does what they always do. They introduce themselves and then they just start taking pictures. And so she's doing her thing and we're excited. And finally she says, "All right, do you guys want to know?" Well, yeah, that's why we're here, you know. And she says, "All right, there it is, it's a boy." If you've ever had a boy, you know what I mean when they say, "There it is, it's a boy." And this was our third child and our third boy. And I remember thinking, right as she said it, I'm like, oh, thank God, my honey-do list is so much shorter because we've already had two boys. I don't have to paint any rooms. I don't have to do... And we hug and kiss and we're excited. And we kind of go into our own little world. And we're talking, you know, we came into this marriage and we had this plan built out. We're going to have 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, and we had 2 names for each. What do you do when you have a third boy? You know, you have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. And so now we're talking, who are we going to tell and what should we... And she just keeps on taking her pictures, you know, doing her thing. And then finally we realize she's taking a lot more pictures than we're used to. And we're waiting and waiting. And then finally she leaves the room and Dr. LaForest comes back in. And Dr. LaForest says, "Mike and Kimberly, we need to talk about your son." And I said, "Okay, what's up?" And she says, "We took pictures and there's a cyst on his brain. It's about like that." I said, "What does that mean?" And then she proceeded to give us a whole bunch of medical stuff that flew right past me. I went into a brain fog instantly. And then she finishes and I say, "All right, is there anything else I should know?" And she says, "Well, yeah, his feet are bent up like this." Well, what does that mean? Well, he's going to need therapy and surgeries and braces and all these things. And eventually he'll walk, but he'll be behind schedule. He'll be no athlete, but he'll eventually walk. Okay. Anything else? She says, "No, that's it." So we hold hands and walk out of that lobby and down the sidewalk and back into our car. And we sit there in silence for probably 4 or 5 minutes. And finally we look at each other and said, well, we should probably just pray and ask for a miracle. And we did, and then we drove home. 4 weeks later, we come back. And it might as well have been 4 months. It's a long time to wait when you have a report like that. And we come back 4 months later, and I'm thinking, all right, here's the day where they tell us it was all a mistake. Sorry about that last one, we were wrong. And we go up the stairs, through the lobby, into the ultrasound room, and she takes her pictures. Then Dr. LaForest comes in and says, "We need to talk about your son. Last time you were here, he had a cyst on his brain, and now there's 3 cysts, and they've spread around his brain." What does that mean? A whole bunch more medical stuff. Well, how about his feet? No, they're still bent in really, really tight. He'll be no athlete, but eventually he'll walk. You know, after that appointment, we go home, and your mind can go a lot of places. If you've ever been in a situation where you feel like control is being taken away from you like that, you know, we had 2 kids already, and they were super easy, especially for me, right? But yet, now we are going to the same doctor, the same ultrasound room, the same everything, and yet every time we went in this room, it got worse. And your mind can start thinking, do we need to change the way our house functions? Do we need a different vehicle? Do we need help? What do we need to do for this? And all the while, how do you stay grounded in what you believe and what, you know, it's a tough spot to be in. 4 weeks go by, and we finally come back for another ultrasound. This is going to be our last one. And we go in there, and we're sitting in this ultrasound room and just waiting. And the same tech comes in, and she takes pictures. She's taking a lot of pictures. And the energy we brought to the first ultrasound is a lot different than the energy now we're sitting with 8 weeks later after it feels like getting punched in the gut several times. And we sit there and wait. Then finally she leaves and Dr. LaForest comes in. And Dr. LaForest jumps on the machine and starts taking some pictures. And so I'm thinking, now, what else could they possibly say? Well, we sit and she says, "All right, let's talk about your son." I've been taking pictures of his brain all over, and we can't find any cysts anywhere. And I said, well, look real close, because we've been on a roller coaster here, and I don't want you to make a mistake now saying it's gone. She goes, no, we've looked everywhere. There are no more cysts. And she said the phrase, looks like you got your miracle. I said, well, that's awesome. Well, how about his feet then, right? I mean, I'm figuring if everything's better, everything's better. And she says, nah, his feet are still curled up, and, you know, he'll eventually walk, but he'll be no athlete. But his head is great. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And then we leave. 12 weeks later, he's finally born. Mother's Day weekend of 2014. We're at my parents' celebrating Mother's Day on Saturday night, and Kimberly goes into labor. 2 hours later, Caleb Isaac Douglas is born. I'm holding him, and as I'm holding him, this kid is small. All right, we've put out a couple bowling balls, and this kid wasn't one of them. He's very small. And as I'm holding him like this, like in one little arm, his feet are curled up. Like, okay, but hey, it's fine. He's healthy, and we're good to go. The next day, a pediatrician comes in. Now, this is not our pediatrician. This is just the guy who works at the hospital. He's making his rounds, checking on it. It's a WASO, so both babies that were there, you know. And he comes around, and he's checking on them, and he says, all right, let me see. He reads the chart, Caleb Douglas. This guy does not know our journey. He does not know what we've been through. And I said, check his feet while you're taking a look at him. So he lays Caleb down, and his feet are bending. He bends them out, bends them back in, and then bends them out. And this is the phrase he used. Man, this kid is flexible. He's going to be quite an athlete. The best phrase he possibly could have said. The roller coaster of that pregnancy was unbelievable for us. A lot of highs and a lot of lows. And yet we just kind of had to stay steady through it all. How do we just hang tight through all this noise? How do we live life when control is being taken away from us? Well, fast forward about a year later. We're in the same ultrasound room because Kimberly's now pregnant with our fourth child. We figured out what causes it. We've got it taken care of. But now she's pregnant with our fourth child. They end up being born 18 months apart. And as we're there for the first ultrasound, the ultrasound tech says, let me get Dr. LaForest. And she comes in and says, just so you know, your daughter has a little tiny cyst on her brain. And I said, it's going to take care of itself. Don't worry about it. And then it did. The next ultrasound, they were like, it's gone. Great. That's outstanding. But when you go through something like that, the way you view ultrasounds, the way you view ultrasound techs, even though she was just doing her job, and actually we're really fortunate, she's someone who specializes in high-risk pregnancies. So she sees everything, and she's very vigilant. But I don't fault our doctor. I don't fault it. It's just what the journey we went on together. But it changes the way you see the world. It changes the experience. So now Caleb, who's 9, is running around, and that kid is still small. He is a heck of an athlete, but he is small to this day. I don't think we do percentiles anymore, but he's probably still single digits, right? But he's small, but man, the kid can run. He can play. And every time we see him play sports, there's this fun memory that we go on of this journey. As we talk tonight, the things that matter most to us are the whole reasons we save and do the things we do. For us, as a family, we have 4 kids, 3 boys and a little girl. And they range from, I got a birthday next week. It'll be 13, 11, 9, and 7. And the things we do for kids is unbelievable. I literally drove here straight from a football game, sitting in some cold bleachers that was in Williamston. I got here about 3 minutes before I walked out here because my son's football game took forever. But we do these things, and we drive all over, and we spend money on braces, and we do all of these different things. Why? Because that's the thing that matters most to us. And as we build a retirement plan, because that's, the flyer said retirement planning, right? But the reason why we do these things so we can live the life we want to live. Your accounts matter, your investments matter, but they are the tool that gets you the resources to do the things you want to do. We have a dream of what life's supposed to look like in retirement. For most of us, we say, well, one of these days when I retire, we'll finally get to fill in the blank, right? Take this trip, build that barn, go see this monument that we've never seen, go, snowbird and get out of here for these awful months that are coming up. Whatever your dream retirement is, the investments you have in the life you've been building by saving, it's about time to come to pass. And we don't want the things we can't control to derail our life. We can't control the stock market. We can't control taxes. We can't control a large part of politics. We can't control a lot of international stuff, but we can determine how much effect they have on our lives. So when we build a successful retirement plan, percentages matter, rates of return matter, inflation matters, but at the end of the day, it's figuring out how they affect our life. There's a thing called the is, does, means test. Is, does, means. It's the fact that for most people in life, we kind of want to know what it is. We definitely like to know what it does, but we really care about what it means to our life. So when we talk about the stock market or investments or different things, what does it mean to our bottom line? So that's our goal tonight, to cover the things that mean the most to you in retirement. As you plan for it, if you're in it, if you're on the doorstep and you're nervous because when I step into retirement, they stop paying me and I don't like that, but I have to step into retirement. Some people are being walked into retirement even though they're not ready to retire. Those are the things we want to cover. So as we go through tonight, normally what happens is now I just grab the clicker and I start going through a presentation. But the last couple workshops I've done, I decided instead to start saying, what do you guys want to talk about? Because I've got my stuff that I talk about all the time. But again, most of us care about certain things in our life. The things we've been through shape what we do or don't want to go through. I had a client who came to me about 6 months ago, and he said, we have to protect everything we have from long-term care. Now, he's 62 and in great health. I thought it's a really strong reaction from someone who's never talked about it before. And so I said, John, what's gone on in life? What's been happening recently? He goes, what do you mean? I said, we've never talked about this. Now, I want to talk about it, but this was never a big deal. Why is it such a big deal to you now? Well, then he starts to tell me the story that over the last 8 months, his mother had to go into a long-term care facility, and it's been draining down her investments. So he's watched this happen to his mom and says, we can't have this happen to us. So again, his experiences and what he's seen shapes what he does or doesn't want to experience in the future. So that's our goal tonight, is to cover what you want to cover. So what we'll do is, they gave me this board. I'm going to apologize right now for my handwriting. All right, it's not going to be great, but we'll talk through it. What do you want to talk about tonight? What are the things that matter most? Anybody have anything? Tax avoidance. That's a great one. Well, I'm going to put it this way. Legal tax avoidance. Because it's two completely different workshops. If you want to know the other one, see me afterwards. I'm just kidding. What else? That's a great one.
Putting money away for grandchildren.
Grandchildren. Okay. What else? Yeah. Not losing money. You know, Warren Buffett, I don't know if you've ever, so obviously we've heard of Warren Buffett, right? He has a couple of great rules. The first rule, rule number 1 is don't lose money. Rule number 2 is live by rule number 1, right? So it's how to not lose money. Okay, one more at the most, because we've learned this over the last 3 or 4 workshops. If I do more than 4, we don't eat till 8:30, and that's not fun for anybody, including me. So I probably should stop at 3, but we'll see if I can work. Generally, the 4th one kind of ties into something else. Anything else? He says, I'm scared to say one now because I don't want him to talk too long. Anything else? Good. We'll cover these 3. Let's talk first about the grandkids one. Money for grandchildren. Now, there are several different ways to pass money down to different generations. And the question is, it always starts at this fundamental level. How much control do you want grandkids to have over the money? Okay? So there's ways you can. You can do a lot of different types of accounts. If you say, well, I want to fund into a grandkid's college fund, or I want to fund into what's called an UTMA or an UGMA account, which is an account that the day they turn 18, they get access to, which sounds good unless you have a knucklehead, right? And I can't speak for everybody in the room, but if I'd been handing in a check for $200,000 at 18 years old, can't say it would have gone great, you know, but that's a type of account, an UTMA, UTMA, or UGMA account. You can do a couple different types. If we want to go to college, for example, we want to specifically fund into college, there's a couple ways. Okay, so we're going to take this one. For college, the main two that people use are what's called a 529 account and a Coverdell account. These are two accounts specifically designed to pay for college for grandkids. The Coverdell has a very small contribution limit. I believe this year it's $2,400 a year per kid you can put in. So that's a pretty low number. 529, you can put in more. The benefits of these are you put the money in and you get a tax deferral. If they use it for college, they can generally pull it out tax-free for qualified expenses, which means the money's never been taxed. That's pretty good. I like that. What's tricky is what if, and with the 529, you can pass these things if I have 6 grandkids, for example, right? Or in our situation, we have 4 kids. If kid 1 doesn't go to college or gets a scholarship and doesn't need college funding, all right, well then I can just transfer it to kid 2 potentially, or kid 3 or kid 4. What if they none need it? Well, then it rolls, if you don't use it for a qualified expense and there's nobody you can transfer it to, it rolls back into IRA format and you have to pay taxes when it comes back out. Not the worst thing in the world. It's the same thing as though you threw it in your 401k all along. So that's the primary way people do it. There's goods and bads to this. It is strictly designed for qualified, accredited institutions, right? I have 4 kids, and I'm pretty convinced they're on 4 completely different life tracks. My firstborn is adamant he's getting a college scholarship to play sports. Not based on the way he played today against Eaton Rapids, but I can tell you that's his goal. My second one wants to be a fireman. Now, I come from a service family. My dad was in the military for 21 years, and still I can't get him to retire, works for the Department of Defense to this day. So we have a long line of servicemen and ministers in my family. And so that's going to be a completely different path. So when my son said, I want to be a fireman, I'm like, can we choose something, like do some civil service? Don't run into buildings that are on fire. That's the one. But yet he wants to do it. And I'm like, if he does it, we're going to support him. I just can't use 529 money to help him pay for something. So that's one of the restrictions. You can't take it and say, you know what? He wants to be a mechanic, a certified mechanic. I'm going to buy him tools. You can't do that with the 529. Okay? So there's some restrictions on that. Another option you can use a non-qualified account in your name. Now we're talking about while we're living. We're living, they're living, how do we get money to them? That's kind of where I'm starting with, okay? So what we are doing for our kids, I don't care so much about the tax deferral as much as I care about the flexibility of the money. So what we're doing is we're funding heavily into non-qualified money. It's money that's after tax. I've already paid tax on it, and I just throw it in a brokerage account. We invest it and we save it. It's in our name. So if kid 1 becomes a knucklehead at age 18, he says, all right, well, I want to go study, I don't know. And this, I'm going to get into a personal thought process here, okay? There are certain degrees I will gladly help them with. Certain degrees I will probably not help them with, okay? When I was at Adrian College, I went down there and I had a radio show, myself and another football player. And I was a business major and he was a ceramics major. And I said, John, how are you going to pay for this private school education? He goes, well, I'll have to teach ceramics. And then from there, hopefully my debt gets forgiven. I said, so the only career you can do is to do something to try and pay for the college that you... Okay, I get it. As long as you're happy in life, right? That's I told him, right? As for my kids, I'm going to say our contributions go towards beneficial degrees and beneficial things in life. So we have control over the money. It's not tied to a school. I don't get the tax deferral, but if we invest in long-term investments, we can get significantly lower tax rates by using long-term capital gains. So we are building a strategy that says, if at 18, kid number 2 wants to join the fire academy. All right, great. And we can go out of pocket or whatever to get him through the fire academy. And then he says, hey, I got a job working, I don't know, Mount Pleasant, in the Mount Pleasant Fire Department. And we're getting married and this and that. Great. I can take from your account and help you buy a home. I can take from your account and help pay for your marriage or for your wedding. I can help pay for things that are not a qualified expense because we are using non-qualified money. That's our preference. But that is one of the major ways. The last one is once you get a working grandchild who is actually earning money, you can fund into their Roth IRA. So if they're earning, you can contribute. They don't have to be the ones to pay the money into their Roth. They just have to show reportable income. So if they go work some summer job and pull in $4,000 or $5,000 over the course of the summer, you can throw $4,000 or $5,000 into their Roth IRA. They can't touch it until 59 and a half. It's going to grow tax-free forever. And there is a flexibility on certain things to pull out and use for other things. So those are the primary uses. If I'm living, they're living, we want to pass on money for certain expenses.
Do they have to be working to do the Roth IRA?
Yes. So to put into any IRA, the question was, do they have to be working to put into the Roth? You have to report income, because even though you're putting into their Roth, as far as the IRS is concerned, they're putting into their Roth. So what's happening is they have to report earned income as much as their W-2 or 1099 earned income, non-pension, non-Social Security, non-disability, actual earned income, as much as they earn up to a certain limit, you can put in. But they have to report it. So you figure this is for your 18-year or older, generally speaking, grandkids. So that's the primary ways we can. Now there's gifting, and there's a lot. Gift is a great opportunity. There's a gift tax exemption every year, how much money you can give. But again, it comes down to if you have minor grandchildren, sometimes it's nice to put a certain amount of handcuffs on the money and then just do that. Because, you know, imagine a lot of 18-year-old guys get a couple $100,000 and they're like, well, I know what car I'm going to go buy. You know, I know these certain things. So it helps. But if you can do that, the one other element you can do, you can use a trust. And you can use a trust to restrict access to funds as well. But that's generally for after you pass. Did that answer most of your question? Did anybody else have questions about funding for? Yeah, Beth.
What is the amount for gifting?
This year, it's about to go up again. It's around $15,000. I don't remember the exact number now. But so there's two numbers. There's an annual gifting exemption and a lifetime exclusion. So you can give so much per year, and neither the gifter nor the giftee has to pay any tax. And that's, again, about $15,000, $16,000. Over your lifetime, currently, you're allowed to give away $11 million per person. Not per person you give to. And if this is a problem, come see me, and we'll make sure you're taken care of, right? But it's actually a very interesting rule. It's called the lifetime exemption. And what it is that over your life, you can give away so much money. Now, the gifting is unlimited how many people you can give it to. It's just a limit to how much you can give them to per year. So, for example, if we have 4 kids, and those 4 kids grow and they all 4 get married, so now we have 8 children, right, with in-laws. Well, I can gift all 8 children the gifting exemption per year, and Kimberly can gift the maximum gifting per year. We could gift all of our grandkids. If these 4 couples produce 16 kids, I can gift all 16 grandkids, and you can gift strangers. It doesn't have to be a direct relationship, nothing. So you can gift away a lot of money and not have any issues with it. However, there's a limit to how much per person you can give per year, but then over your lifetime you can give away $11 million. That number's coming back down to $5 million in 2026. And it's an interesting one. I don't know if you guys remember George Steinbrenner. He was the owner of the Yankees. If not, if you're a Seinfeld fan, you may remember it as well. But George Steinbrenner owned the Yankees. And he died in 2011. What's interesting is that was the first year in the history of our tax code since 1916 that we didn't have a lifetime exemption number. Means if you happen to die in 2011, you could give away $1 billion and there was no estate tax on it. So when his family got the Yankees from the dad, they paid no estate tax on it. So I think at the time the Yankees were valued at just under $1 billion. And it was the 1 year since 1916 that there was no lifetime exemption. Pretty interesting. So, any other questions about gifting to next generation? All right, good. Let's go to how to not lose money. The answer is dig a hole in the backyard or fill your mattress. So it just depends on how you're investing, right? There are unique times in the market, and to say that there's a model that's always true is inaccurate, right? For a long time, we've said that banks are the one place your money goes to die, right? You don't make any money at the bank. They sell certificates of disappointment, and you never earn any interest. Well, now, this wonderful opportunity we have where banks are paying 4%, or credit unions are paying 4% on money market accounts, on your checking account. That's crazy. 1 year CDs are paying 5%. Has anybody looked at 3 to 5 year CDs? They've dipped below 5%. Well, I thought the longer I commit my money to a bank, the higher rate of return they give me. Well, banks know that we are on a 2-year blip. Interest rates have spiked up historically fast to try and counteract inflation. They raised interest rates. Banks are now paying, there's a Schwab money market account that we use that's paying 5.2% on liquid cash. That's crazy. That hasn't happened, in the last 40 years. So you could use that right now. You can use bank money, and I tell people, for the first time in a long time, we can make money at the bank. So don't be ashamed to have a decent cushion there, because you can make it and still stay pretty liquid. On the other hand, the market is volatile. The volatility in the last 6 years has gone through the roof. Both positive, and we think of volatility as always negative. It's not. Volatility creates gains, and it creates some losses. There is a roller coaster factor to volatility. We have had the most insane historical run since 2009 in the stock market. Exponential growth curves in the stock market to the point where it has almost, if you took the stock market's returns from 2009 back to 1909, so the 100-year return of the market, it was 6.2%. That's the average return. You know how hard it is to move a 100-year average? It's really hard. You could have 3 great years, and it doesn't matter. It goes from 6.2 to 6.4. Because of how incredible the market's been since 2009, our current 100-year average is 10%. The last 12 to 13 years in the market have been so historically good that we have a generation of people who have forgotten what it means to lose money in the stock market. There's an interesting study. It came out about 6 months ago. People age 20 to 40 believe that 3% is a fair mortgage rate. A fair mortgage rate, 3%. Well, that makes sense, because when did people 20 to 40 buy their first homes? Post 2009, and really through these historically low interest rates. People age 40 to 60 believe that 4.5 is a fair mortgage rate. Okay. People age 60 plus believe 6% is a fair mortgage rate. That tells you recency bias. What's happened in my life versus people who don't know history? Those who bought their first home in 78, 79, 82, they say, yeah, I had an 18% mortgage. And then we were excited because the bank gave us 12% in passbook or in CDs. But if the bank's giving you 10 or 12, I promise you they're making 16 to 18. And there were 18% mortgages. And if you told that to someone under the age of 40 right now, that there was an 18% mortgage, they would think, was it during the Great Depression? Was it, were we at World War? No, it was the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Within most of those people's right at the start of their life, that's where mortgage rates were. When we look at the history of the stock market, we have these run-ups. There are cycles and seasons to markets. And the market's really good for a season. Not as good as it's been the last 13 years, but really good. And now what you tend to see is this pullback in the market that reckons over a couple years, not over a couple months. So the last several years in the market have been very good. Last year, not so good. The first 6 months of this year was good, and then it's really been pulling back ever since. So how do we invest without risk? Well, you need to understand the purpose and the timeline of money. There is no way to be completely safe and compete with inflation. Because if your money market's giving you 5%, you can be confident inflation is 6 to 7 at best. Even though we know that certain areas of our life has had a lot more than 6 or 7% inflation. But yet, well, I'm getting 5% in the bank. I know we have to keep up. That's what's called inflationary risk. Well, I want to have it in the stock market so it can grow. Okay, well then you have stock market risk. Well, what if I just don't do anything? I just want to pull it out and put it in the backyard or put it in a safe. You have what's called inflationary risk. You have a lot of risk inside of that. So that's how you have to figure out, build a plan. I need some money, whether you call it a bucket system. Everybody talks about it like this. I'm the one who created this system. You can call it whatever you want, a bucket system, a house. At our firm, we draw a house because we're very visual. So I say, how do I build a portfolio that's successful? Well, money that I need for income is my foundation. How much income do I need in retirement? And it's going to sound like a roundabout answer, but this is how we get to an appropriate amount of risk in the portfolio. Well, I need $6,000 a month to live off of in retirement. Okay. My Social Security, her Social Security. Do we get a pension? I don't know. Most people don't anymore. Less than 8% of Americans have pensions. So these two combined, I have $4,000 a month, but I need $6,000 a month. All right, I have to solve for $2,000. I need an investment that will give me $2,000 a month. A dividend portfolio, a structured note, an annuity, preferred stock, whatever you choose, you get something that will cover this gap. I personally prefer no risk in my income because that frees me up for better risk up top. Everybody's different. Some people say, well, I like real estate. Okay, there's risk there too. And tends to be a shelf life in real estate as well. Because at 60, a lot of people still really enjoy a rental. But I constantly see people who come in at 70, 72, 75 say, I'm done. I don't want to do real estate. I need to sell these things. And then they sell them and they get this chunk of money. And then now I don't have the guaranteed income anymore that real estate gave me. So we have to find another solution for it. But something to solve for this. Then we go through and say, all right, how much money do I need for life in the next 1 to 5 years? Well, for my income, not for your income. For the cruise, for the kitchen remodel, for the gifting, for whatever it is you planned on doing over the next 5 years, how much money do we need? Well, if we look at, I don't know all the absolutes, but I know that the cruises and the kitchens and all that stuff and the snowbirding and all that, that's probably going to cost us about $150,000 over the next 5 years. Okay. This $150,000 cannot be exposed to heavy market risk because you need it. I had a client who called me November of 2019. Let's go back in the time machine to November of 2019. The market is a never-ending winner, right? It'll never crash. And so everybody's just running up with it and doing all these great things. Even in 2018 with all the volatility, it only lost 6% and then it immediately recovered. And I had a client who called me and said, hey, Mike, we got 2 things we're doing next year. We're going to Italy for 3 weeks, and we're going to put this thing, it's called, was it Trex Deck? Trex, right? They're redoing their cottage up north with Trex, and it's going to cost $30,000. Okay. So they said we need $60,000 for next year's projects and travel. Okay. So I took that money and shifted it into a very, very conservative corporate bond and fixed income bucket. Specifically because if they need it next year, now the market had been going gangbusters. But I said, this is just our rule. We shift it down and we protect it. Well, from that point on, December was incredible in the market. January was incredible in the market. And the first half of February was really good. So now it's looking like I lost them a bunch of money because I kept this 60 grand out of a couple million very safe. Well, here comes February 19th. February 19th was the high point of the stock market going into the COVID crash. Then the market went on the fastest 30% drop in the history of the stock market. Took 22 trading days to lose 30%. Sprints down, slowly starts unexplainably recovering despite lockdowns, despite GDP, despite all these things. And they call me in May. And they said, hey, I know we had some things planned out for this year. Obviously, Italy was probably the worst place in the world they could have tried to go during 2020. So they weren't going there. They finally went last year. But they said, where do we sit with that money? I said, well, I took it out of the market really back in November. It could have grown to 66, but since I made it safe, it only grew to about $60,500. Then the market crashed and it stayed at $60,500. And then instead of dropping from 60 down to $40,000, we're at $60,500. They said, well, how did you know that was going to happen? I said, I didn't know. The only thing I knew was that you needed the money next year. So we de-risked it. We can't have next year's cruise subject to the market. We can have 15 years from now cruise subject to the market. We can have money I may give to my kids someday subject to the market, but not next year's cruise. So that's how we build this. You want to target 3 to 5% in this money. Very safe, very stable, and you can do that in a lot of fixed income tools. Then you structure out, all right, years 6 to 10, years 10 plus, and then the last one is legacy. If you structure it that way, targeting the money out, saying, all right, I know I don't know what my expenses are going to be 6 to 10 years from now, but is there money that I can just kind of section off and say, all right, if I don't need this 300 grand for the next 6 to 10 years, I can give it a little bit more leash, a little bit more rope. I don't want it cutting down and losing a ton, but most dips in the market are followed by a really nice recovery. So I don't want to necessarily miss all of it, like we were missing all of it with the 1 to 5 year money. It's a different thought process. So you can't invest in the market without any risk, but there are some very unique things like structured notes, where you basically are saying I'm either going to get 0 or a pretty decent return. If the market crashes, I get a 0, which means I lose to inflation. But I can also get all my money back if the market crashes, or if the market goes up, I can make 5, 7, 10% in a year. So there's some very unique ways of investing that are becoming more common now, because people are saying, I just can't throw everything in the market. I'm retired. Now, should our younger crowd go in structured notes? No. The market dropping is a great buying opportunity. It's called dollar cost averaging, right? The market dips, I keep buying in with every paycheck, and when it runs up, we run up. And that's where you should be, investing in the dip. It's a wonderful opportunity. Retirees aren't looking for wonderful opportunities to buy the dip all the time with all their money, especially not your income. I had one guy who said it really well. He says, I like risk in my portfolio, just not in my paycheck. Okay. That's a retiree's brain, right? That's where we get to that shift. The paradigm shift that says it's not about having all the gains, it's about not getting all the losses. Or one guy told me, I don't need you to make me 20, just don't lose me 10. Okay, that's a whole different thought process. On the other hand, I had one of our clients, she's about 78 years old. We're going through a review with her last year, and she says to me, Mike, with these portfolios, are you invested the same way I am? Like you've got skin in the game? I said, no. At the time I was 39, I said, I'm 39, I do this professionally, I'm very comfortable with risk. I said, I am what's called leveraged. I have my investments 3 times the stock market negative. The market was dropping, I went short on the market and I went very aggressive. I did not do that with our client funds because I'm 39 and my average client's about 65. Whole different portfolio build. I said, but I built your portfolio and I believe in the ideology. So yes, are my parents in the portfolio is the better question. Yes, they're in the same portfolio you are, but I'm not. Because each family has a different risk tolerance, risk threshold, and desire or need for risk in the future. So to invest safely right now, take advantage of the unique opportunity to make money in the bank. Not with everything. I-bonds, if you've heard of I-bonds, the sweet window on that has pretty much passed. The opportunity to make a lot of interest on a little bit of money, that's what I-bonds were. But really now that's where we're at. Have talks about structured notes. We're not in the season where bonds are a good purchase yet, because bonds have a hard rule. When interest rates go up, bonds lose money. Well, interest rates aren't sprinting up anymore, but there's a strong belief that on Halloween we're getting another 0.25% raise, and then probably they're going to hold off till March or April and probably another 0.25%, and then later on in the year they may bring it back down next year, which means at least 2 more times I'm pretty much guaranteed to lose money by owning bonds. All right, well, I would never go to you and say, hey, I think you should buy stock and life plan. Heads up, it's going to be a dog for the next 8 months. Well, why don't I just wait 8 months to buy it? Well, you could, but shouldn't you always have some type of an equity like this? No. If you know it's going to lose, don't buy a loser. So now is not a good time to be in bonds. But as soon as they start dropping interest rates, we could see a pretty positive influence on bonds for the first time in a couple of years. So be aware of that. That's a long answer to a short question. How do I not invest in risk? You can see why I also limit it to 3 or 4 questions per night. Any other questions about how to not lose money is a very generic term, right? It's kind of one of those things. How do I not lose a monopoly? Don't play the game. That's kind of, if you don't want to lose money in the market, don't be in the market. But it's okay to have some money at risk, just as long as you understand. 'Cause that's one of the biggest frustrations. Why did I lose money? Why do I see my accounts dropping? Why am I being told don't worry, it's just a paper loss, right? Those things I'm uncomfortable with at this phase of my life. But if you at least know, all right, I have these 4 accounts. This one can never lose. This one should rarely lose. This one, it's okay if it loses a little. And this little one, my Roth, which preferably your Roth should be your riskiest money that you have. My Roth, well, then that's the one that it's okay. I'm just not going to check it so often. Because if it has a bad week or a bad month or a bad quarter, that's okay. It's designed for 10 years from now or for my kids and grandkids. So I don't care. Just let it run. So that's a thought process towards risk. Our last one. It's a good thing we did 3. All right. Legal tax avoidance. Stop record. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to call it legal tax strategies, just in case anybody from FINRA happens to be walking through this restaurant. Legal tax strategies. What can we do to not pay so much in taxes? We have to understand the nature of taxes, the history of taxes, and the future of taxes. Right now is a unique opportunity to pay more in taxes for most Americans. Let me qualify this. For most Americans, this is a window to pay more in taxes, but to better yourself over the long run. Here's why. The Tax and Jobs Act went into effect 1/1/18. That is our current tax strategy, tax code that we're in. It went into effect January 1/2018. For most Americans, your taxes went down a little bit. But there's a couple moving pieces. If you were in the 25% bracket, you're in a 22. If you were in a 15% bracket, I'm in a 12. What does that ultimately mean? It means a couple more bucks in my paycheck every week. That's nice, especially because we have a progressive system where that means I'm taxed a little more at 0, a little more at 10, so it's a better system overall in terms of trying to get more money in the paycheck. We had deductions and credits. And it used to be that when you add them together for a married couple, you could knock off about $21,000. The Tax and Jobs Act said, we're getting rid of credits. And everybody said, no, we're getting rid of credits. Right, but we took the standard deduction for a married couple up to $24,000. I don't need those credits anyways, as long as my deductions are bigger. Now, for most people, that's why they call it the standard deduction, is because what most people take. Some people itemize. I have rental properties, I have this, I have a carry forward loss. Well, those are unique situations. But the reason why they call it the standard deduction is because of what most people use. $24,000. Those went into effect. So we had tax brackets dropping. There's a lot of little minutia of also went into, so if you own a business, there's some changes. The way you can pass through money changed a little bit. But for most Americans, these are the core things. Our brackets went down, our deductions went up, which means not only is the money that I'm taxed on taxed a little less, but the amount of money I have to pay taxes on is a little bit less. That's a good thing. This was not for infinity. This is designed to run out 12/31 of 25. It's expiring in 2 years and 2 months, which means, or they call, I'm sorry, rather than raising taxes, they call it sunsetting, because sunsetting sounds better. They're going to sunset the program, which means that now taxes go back to where they were. There's a couple things that actually stick around, and they're not all great, but they're, again, for about 1% of people. For most people, what happens as of 1/1 of 26, I'm back to 25, I'm back to 15, and we're back to $21,000 plus some COLA of deductions and credits. If that was it, we could live with that. In 2018, when this was written into law, our national deficit was right around $20 trillion. $20 trillion. As of 2020, at the start of the year, we were about $22 trillion. Today, we've officially gone over $32 trillion of debt. So since this was written into law, we've raised our debt by $12 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but what makes it a really big number is the fact that we were only at 20 to begin with. So we raised our debt by 60% in 5 years. Historically speaking, I said you need to know kind of the tax code. You also need to understand the history of taxes. Our country had no taxes, no federal income tax, until 1861. 1861, we had the Civil War, and we had to pay both sides of the Civil War. President Lincoln said, all right, since we have to pay this thing, everybody pays a 3% flat tax. All right? So we go to 3% flat, which means if you make a lot, 3% of a lot. If you make a little, 3% of a little. Seems like a pretty fair system. That lasted until 1871, when we had paid off all of the debt, everything that cost us from the Civil War. And then Congress said, and this is going to be very unique, you don't hear this very often, they said, hey, the debt's paid, let's just cancel the tax. They didn't repurpose it, they didn't find some good program or somewhere to send it. Nope, they said, all right, debt's paid, we're going to cancel this, so we had zero again from 1871 to 1916. World War I. Well, when World War I came into being, we said, what should we do? And the government put into effect not a flat tax again, but a progressive tax system, saying based on how much you earn, you're taxed at different rates and brackets. It's the system we know and love today, right? So, depending on how much you earned, you may be taxed at 0, 10, 20. And what happened was they didn't start out with just some baby step into the program. They jumped out right away where the top tax bracket was about 50%. Imagine 1915, you earn $100,000 and you pay no federal income tax. The next year, you've done nothing different. But now, out of my 100,000, I get about 60 of it. Not including state taxes now. What's different? Well, we're at war, so now the government took 40%. So I know we get frustrated with a lot of stuff, but put yourself in that position of the person who made money in 1915 and never paid income tax. 1916, they took a whole bunch of your money. And it spiked up, and it stayed there for a couple years through World War I, and then it came down through the 20s and early 30s. Why did it sprint down during the 20s and early 30s? Great Depression. So the government brought them way back down to try and stimulate the economy, and they stayed low. until 1941. And they went up, 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 and they peaked out in 1945, World War II. The highest federal tax bracket level in 1945 was 94%. 94. Now that's not saying every dollar you earned was at 94, but once you hit about $200,000 of income, which is a lot of money back then, all the dollars above 200 grand taxed at 94%, which means out of your next 100 grand, you got $6,000 from federal, plus whatever the state took. That's brutal. And it stayed high, but then it kind of slowly came down over the years because from 1945 really through 1980, we were either at war or paying for a war between World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and then the advent of a lot of social programs where they repurposed taxes into other things. 1980, President Reagan comes around. And why was he so big on taxes being lowered? That was a big thing on his platform. We are not going to pay a lot in taxes. Well, because in 1945, he was an actor. And in 1945, he was commissioning between $80,000 and $100,000 a film. And he realized, if I make 2 films, I'm taxed relatively appropriately. My third film is completely in the 94% bracket. So he would tell studios, I'm not going to take a third one. You can be the first movie next year or you can give it away. I'm not working for free. In his prime earning years as an actor, he was being de-incentivized from working, not because of his love for the job or his abilities, because of taxes. He said, that's not good for me, it's not good for individuals, it's not good for the country if people are de-incentivized from working. So fast forward to 1980, when at this point, I always love, there's these great reels of all the jokes he would tell, when he was at his thing. But he would always make these comments about why he was so passionate about lowering taxes. So they came down, they stayed down, they bumped up a little bit, and then when the Tax and Jobs Act went into effect, we are at equal rates to the Great Depression for most Americans, which means that we are at the lowest rates except for when there was no rates. We also know that history tells us that when there's World War I, the Civil War, World War II, some event that triggers a lot of debt, oftentimes an international event, but it's not a requirement, something that triggers a lot of debt, it causes taxes not to step up, but to sweep up to a much higher rate. So right now we have our current tax code through the end of 2025. What can we do? Well, if I have this tax year, this year's not lost. You say, well, I didn't do any tax strategies this year. You have till 12/31. You can take some of your pre-tax money, pay taxes on it now, throw it in a Roth. If you have long-term gains opportunities, some stock you've owned for a long time, you may be able to sell that and pay no taxes if we stay below certain thresholds. Or you can sell about $300,000 of stock that you've held for a long time, $400,000 up to $500,000 of stock, and only pay 15% in tax. In about 3 to 5 years, that same stock being sold will most likely trigger a 25 to 30% tax. So should we be doing some of that? Yeah. We should be looking at our finances. We always talk about diversification, like I need some stocks, some bonds, some international, some mid-cap, some large cap. We need to address, more importantly, how much am I going to pay in taxes over the next 20 to 30 years? Whenever I ask people what's the number one expense in retirement, but everybody says healthcare, right? Everybody says healthcare. I'm like, because it is though, it's taxes 100%. And I understand why. Because if, like with what my client went through, when you see someone who goes into long-term care and it costs them $6,000 a month for 3 years or 2 years, you go, that's crazy. It just cost them $180,000. And then we look at the numbers and I say, if you have a $550,000, $500,000 portfolio and you live 30 years, most likely you'll pay about $580,000 in taxes on that money. Long-term care is not as expensive as that. So the number one liability and risk, or opportunity, if you choose to pay taxes now, is to do some conversion. Take money that you've been saying, I don't want to pay taxes and I'll deal with it later. Pay taxes now while it's at a discount. There is a law of diminishing returns. You don't want to get past a certain point. You say, all right, Now I'm just paying money so my kids get free stuff. And I don't necessarily want that. But I also don't want to die and the government just rips a bunch of money from us. So I'm not trying to leave a pot of gold for my kids, but I'm definitely not leaving it for the government. So whatever we can do to protect it, at least keep it in the family, that's what we should be doing. So that's a tax strategy. So tax avoidance, technically the answer is real estate. So if you want to know how to hide money in taxes, real estate and farming. Those are the best two ways to get money to disappear. But really, right now is a unique opportunity where we should be considering to pay more money in taxes. Not unnecessarily, but we're making an investment towards the future. We're saying, all right, today I'm in a 22% bracket. And I can convert $80,000 of Roth and stay in that 22% bracket. In 3 years, that same money is going to cost us 25%, but they'll most likely not go to 25. They may raise it to 30 or 35. So at least the enemy I know is this tax bracket today. The enemy I don't know, we'll see. If we keep printing money and doing $12 trillion of debt every 3 to 5 years, that's not sustainable. So what do? Get your money out of the pre-tax system as much as possible, because once it's in a Roth or in a non-qualified, it's off the tax grid largely, right? You don't have required minimum distributions on Roth money. It passes on to your kids tax-free at whatever those tax rates will be 25, 30 years from now. And it's been settled and done, and now it's just our family's money. The government does not get to make me take it out or pay taxes on it. So these 3 years, so basically the balance of the next 2.5 months of this year is the 2023 tax year, 2024 and 2025. Those are our 3 opportunities. In 2026, they are going up. It's already written into law. The question is how much? So we've already eliminated the if, the when, who, right? It's just a matter of how much. So the answer for taxes is we should actually be attacking taxes. A lot of times I'll show this video of these kids playing Monopoly. And one kid is straightening up his houses and saying to his mom how clean his spot is. And the other kid is sobbing because he landed on a luxury tax spot, but he doesn't have any money to pay it. And he's crying and he's saying, and she goes, "What's the matter, Donnie? Where's all your money gone?" He goes, "Taxes. It's the worst. The worst part of the game is taxes." I'm like, man, the life lessons this 8-year-old is learning in a game of Monopoly. And he goes, "It's the worst part of the game, taxes." Yeah.
Whether you lose it in the stock market or you lose it in the check you write from the government.
Yeah. When people come in and they say, "I have about $1 million in my 401k," I'm like, your account balance is $1 million, but really you have about $700,000. If you die and it instantly gets liquidated, you have about $600,000. If we stretch it out and properly tax it over the years, you have about $1.2 million. It's all about how you play the game. Those same 2 kids sit down at the Monopoly game, the same rules. The same chance card, community chest cards, the same pieces. One kid is thriving and the other one's being taken advantage of by this awful system. But yet, they both have the same opportunity. That's what taxes are. They're an opportunity right now.
With what you talked before about leaving money to grandkids or whatever. Example I like to tell people is, say you leave your grandkid $1 million. That'd be great. Well, after 26, they have to take it in 10 years. So if they get it in a Roth, they can take $100,000 a year if they spread it out over 10 years. Each of those years is non-income.
Yeah.
Versus if you have it in traditional IRAs or whatever, they have to take $100,000 a year and take that as additional income, additional taxes. So all your hard-earned money that you scrimped and saved and nurtured, the government says, "I want my cut of it."
Yeah.
At a high rate.
Yeah, at a high rate. And that rule has changed 3 times since it came into being 3 years ago. So that's the other part. It's like, well, I built this plan out in 2019, and when my kids inherit the IRA, they get to stretch it over their lifetime. Nope, that went away in 2020. Oh, okay, well, how much do they have to take out? Well, they have 10 years. They don't have to take anything out per year. They just have to settle up at the end of the year. That was 2020. In 2021, they said, well, we're actually going to raise the rate that has to come out for people who take RMDs, but it won't affect inherited money. Then in 2022, they said we're going to shift the rates of how much retirees have to take out, and we may be putting into effect a required distribution on the 10-year payout to your kids. And then this year they said, hey, There's a 10-year payout required from your IRAs. They have to take some money out every year. We didn't tell you about it before, so we're going to forgive that. But the moving forward, they got money 3 years ago. They have 7 years, and they have to take out so much per year. They are moving the goalposts on us every single year. The amount of continuing education we have to spend as a firm on just learning the updates to a current tax code is ridiculous. But it's because they keep moving the goalposts. That's why people ask all the time, they're like, well, you just do investments? I'm like, investments are almost the easy part. Taxes and legacy planning is the complicated part, right? Investments are just trying to track the market, you know? It's all these other pieces, these other players on your retirement team, because investments are one player on your basketball team. But you get all these other things, taxes, estate planning, risk, how my money is distributed. Should we have durable power of attorneys and all these things, inflation, Medicare, Medicaid, all these things factor in, but yet we talk about investments, we coach the one player and hope the whole team wins. I know we've covered a lot of ground, but I'm really enjoying this format more than just me doing my canned talk. If there's anything we've covered and you said, well, you said a lot of things, but I don't remember most of it, that's okay. You're going to have questions that pop up over the next couple days and different things. But why we're here is because we love educating people so they can make good choices. We love sitting down with people, hearing their story. You know, in the same way that the reason I open talking about our experience with my son is because it shaped our life. It changed the way we view things. And it really helped us reposition certain priorities. Well, in the same way, you have a story. You have something that has brought you to this moment. And now as you live out the rest of your life, you say, we just need to make sure that we're going to be okay. That when things get taken away from us, when we lose control, that we're still going to be okay. Can someone take a look at our situation and just give us an honest feedback? That's why we're here. We sit down for about 45 minutes with you and hear your story. And at the end of that, we give you some advice, or we say, hey, if you need help, we're here to help. So that's what the offer is tonight. There's no cost to the meeting. There's nothing, just 45 minutes of your time. The two questions people ask all the time. Well, do we come to your house? We do not. Our office is 2 blocks north of here at the McPherson Mansion. It's very easy to get to, and now that the construction's done. And Livingston County is huge, and we have a Lansing office. So I can't go from west of Lansing to Whitmore Lake to St. John's and to Jackson in a day. So instead, we have people come to our office where our resource and our team is, and you get to visit the McPherson Mansion, which is a really cool building. But you come to our office is the first question. The second question is, how much do we charge for meetings? We never charge for meetings. We're trying to figure out if we can help you in any way, or if you're a good fit, we're a good fit. Well, we just want to hear your story and see where you sit, and if we can offer any advice, we'd love to do it. So Katie's going to come around with the calendar here in just a moment and schedule a time for us to get together and chat. And I look forward to seeing you. If you have any questions, or you say, well, I had a question I wanted to ask, but I didn't want to give you a fourth one, so we'd be here too long, we can answer at that meeting as well. Okay? The food's ready to come out. I'm going to say a quick word of grace over the food. If you have anything else, flag me down. I'll gladly come answer them for you. Okay? God, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the chance to come to Diamonds. They're such gracious hosts. Thank you for them. Bless the hands that prepared our food. Bless to our bodies. Help us to get home safely. Thank you for hopefully less rain and more good weather moving forward. And help us all to have a great night. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thank you so much for coming out. If you have any questions, flag me down. Thanks, guys.